welcome to the Love, Listen, Talk, Repeat podcast. I'm Wendy Capewell, your relationship specialist, and this podcast is all about things relating and affecting relationships. I'll be interviewing guests who are experts in their profession, learning more about what they do and how they help others. In some episodes, I'll be sharing some insights and tips of my own. So settle back and enjoy. Today I'm going to be talking to Kathryn Colas. She is the founder and CEO of SimplyHormones, delivering menopause solutions and training to individuals and into the workplace. So, Kathryn, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us, me and the listeners, a little bit more about what you do?
Yes, I'd love to. I suppose this is a new career for me that I started in the latter half of my life, really, as you do. And it all came about because I had such a terrible time going through menopause myself. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't even diagnosed for years. You know, I'd resigned from my executive job. I was having a terrible time at home with my husband. We were just rowing all the time, and I was blaming him for everything. It was his fault. We didn't like each other. My libido went out the window, and sex was totally off the menu. And my youngest daughter was going through puberty, so there are a lot of doors banging. And eventually, I came to realise. I started to do some research. I discovered that I was going through menopause, and I thought, what is this thing? Why doesn't anybody tell women about this? Am I the only one? And then I began to find out that there were a lot more women around, of course. Every woman will go through menopause at some time or other, and to a greater or lesser degree. And to me, it was just 10 years of hell. And so that's when I decided to do something about it, and that's how I set up SimplyHormones.
Yes, and you're so right, because the chances are women are going to go through the menopause when their children are going through puberty, and that's a big clash, isn't it? So, yeah. Wow. Yeah, and then the poor man standing on the sidelines, just scratching his head, not knowing what to do or where to go, because he can't. I can remember. My menopausal stage was slightly different because mine was brought on by was having chemotherapy, and that brought it on then. So therefore, I had an awful lot more else to deal with, and I don't know whether I was, going what was
on your head or
didn't know which was which at all. But even when I had PMS, I can remember just that sense of that person is walking on the same planet as me.
Yes.
So. Well,
menopause is PMS on speed. That's how I describe it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when I'm doing my presentations to an audience, I always put a slide up of Disney's Seven Dwarfs. And so if you can imagine Disney's Seven Dwarfs, because somebody sent it to me years ago and they've been renamed. And the new names are Itchy, Bitchy, Sweaty, Sleepy, Bloated, Forgetful, and my favourite, Psycho. And, so the audience would fall about laughing, mostly women, but if there were men, they would laugh too, because they just get it, because that's women on a monthly basis, isn't it? So if you can imagine getting that every day or every other day or every couple of weeks, well that's menopause, and plus with knobs on. And so that's why I felt that there was this need to educate men and women about menopause and what was going on.
Yeah, definitely. It's been one of those things that people don't talk about. It was never talked about. It was something, and there was something for me almost embarrassing.
Yes.
If anyone, I felt, I had the hot flushes or flashes, whatever they're referred to now, but it was that real embarrassment everyone can see and everybody knows what's going on for me.
Yes.
I really felt total embarrassment. And of course, the more embarrassed I got,
yes,
the more my
flashes
were going on. And I just, dreadful.
But it's the forgetfulness as well, and not being able to string a sentence together. and the aching joints, and there are just so many symptoms that you would never associate. Some women say to me, oh, I sailed through menopause, I didn't notice a thing. And then they might attend one of my workshops because they've been told to. And then they said, you know what, I have ticked so many boxes. I had no idea that these things that I did feel and thought they were something else, just a part of something I was feeling at the time, that they were part of menopause.
Yeah,
it makes sense when you know all about it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I so agree with you, because we just don't. As teenagers, we haven't got a clue about it, and young women.
No.
And I just want to mention to our listeners the fact that we knew each other as children.
Yes.
And our mothers were best friends long before we were born.
Yeah.
And we lost touch with each other over the years. And then it was just one of those, somebody just connected me. I was looking for people that interesting people to come on my podcast interviews. And we reconnected us again. And it was, wow. And you sent me that email and said, but our mothers were best friends. Oh, goodness, because I didn't remember the name. And it's lovely to reconnect as well. And it's just thinking about when we were children, how, you don't dream of those things, do you?
No.
And menopause is what? Well, it was always referred to as the change of life.
The change, yes, in a whisper, yes.
Yes, in that definite whisper.
Yeah. And I remember, the only thing I remember about my mum was I heard her talking to somebody one day about my aunt, my dad's younger sister, and she was saying, oh, she's going through the change, she's going to feel a few things, like this. And I thought, what are they talking about? And when my mum was going through menopause, I was a teenager, about 17 or 18, something like that. And I kept turning the heating up, and she kept turning it down. So we had this constant battle. And, I was getting really stroppy being a teenager, and then she was getting really stroppy because she was going through menopause, and not say anything. And also I remember my mum left home.
Really?
She had this flaming row with my dad, and I remember coming home from work, and he was in the garden mowing the lawn. And I said, oh, where's Mum? Oh, she's out, she won't be back. Didn't take much notice. Then the phone rang, and Mum said, oh, hello, I'm not coming home tonight. Well, what's wrong? Nothing, I just need to get away. And she came back a day or two later. Nobody said a word. Zip. Never mentioned. And it was only when it was starting to happen to me, I made the connection, and I thought, she was at that age, she was going through menopause. Because it happened to a friend of mine. She left home for a few days. The women reach this stage where they feel they can't cope, and that is a phrase so used by so many women. I just can't cope with my job, the home, partner, kids, the whole 3 yards. Can't do it anymore. It must be work-life balance, and it is so not. That's why I resigned from my job. It must be work-life balance.
Yes.
I couldn't work it out. Crazy, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's crazy, the fact that we're not educated enough about it.
Yes.
That's the sad part.
Yes.
And women.
And talking to my doctor, and he said to me, he'd done a blood test, which is a bit of a waste of time, really, because your hormones are up and down like a fiddler's elbow. You can't get a proper reading anyway. And he said to me, oh, well, you're not there yet. And I thought, what's he talking about? What does he mean I'm not there yet? It's obviously something that I should know. And so I didn't ask, because I felt foolish that I didn't know what on earth he was talking about.
Yeah.
And it was only again later that I realised what he did mean. So it's just daft, isn't it?
Isn't it daft? Those things we don't talk about.
Yes.
Awful.
Yeah.
And there are luckily that we are becoming more enlightened now about lots of subjects. So yes. And I think it's women like you that really are making a difference. So I think it's really well.
And the media are getting more involved as well now. There are Radio 4 Woman's Hour this week, for instance, have had a whole series of programmes, and it's been just brilliant. And I've been on BBC Radio on all sorts of different counties, talking about the same thing in to join up with Radio 4. So it's good that they're talking to women who understand women rather than just getting the medical view. So that's what's good about it, I think.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things, even with anxiety and so on. I don't think GPs they're not trained in that psychological way.
No.
And when I've had clients and explained to them what's going on in their bodies, and it's a real, I didn't know that.
Yes.
And I've even had a GP as a client and explaining to her that initially I was like, I'm a bit anxious here because I'm sure she's more educated than I am on this, and yet not.
No.
So again, I think we've all got something to add.
And those two causes, stress and anxiety, are two of the biggest reasons that people are taking time off work, men and women. But from the women's perspective, they're being misdiagnosed. They're going down the mental health route and being diagnosed with depression, as I was, and being prescribed antidepressants. And of course, it's a transitional period they're going through. So the stress and anxiety may be caused by job, family, and other things that are going on, but it is exacerbated by their hormones. And that's why if they can get some hormone balance, then that's going to help them hugely.
Yeah. Yes, because that's it. It's a balancing, isn't it? It's a balancing act.
Yes.
So tell us more about what the menopause is about.
Well, the menopause for me was a disastrous time in my life. And because of that, because of all the feelings I had, all the emotional upset, I felt like a doormat. I felt people were taking advantage of me. And so I said to myself, I'm not going to let this happen to other women, because this doesn't have to happen. And if only I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have had to go through all that rubbish. And the worst part of it was that my husband and I wanted to divorce each other. We've got a big bed. We've got a super king size bed, so it's a very big bed. I'm 5'2", he's 5'8", so we're not big people. And so it was like living on an island. I'm over one. I couldn't get any further to the edge of my bed to get that distance between me and him, because I just didn't want to be near him. And that must have been awful for him, because he told me that he felt so isolated because we just weren't communicating on any level. And I would either burst into tears, I wouldn't be able to find the words to speak to him, or we'd scream and shout at each other. And in the end, I wrote him a letter. And I always recommend this to women when I'm talking to them. If you're having relationship problems, or even with your doctor, if you don't know how to express yourself in words to that person you're speaking to, write it down on your own when you're in a calm space. Just write it all down. And as far as the doctor's concerned, make a list of those irritating symptoms that you think are too silly to say anything about. Yeah. And if it's a partner, a relationship problem, just, throw it all out there on the page and say everything you want to say that you can't say when you're trying to have a conversation face to face. And he was quite surprised at that. And I was reading about psychology as well. I thought I just had to get a handle on this thing called menopause. So I started to read all sorts of psychology books, the history of women, because I came to realize that the medical profession are not joining up the dots, as I call it, because there are so many physiological and mentally, I can't think of the words have gone now, aspects of menopause, that it's an holistic affair rather than just I've got depression, I've got palpitations, I've got type 2 diabetes, whatever it is, it's all part of the same thing. And so that's how we need to view it all in order to treat it, or give you some options about how you go about dealing with it, including relationships. And that for me is huge. And because it was such an awful time, as I said, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And if I could have dealt with that better, I wish I could have done. I could now, of course, I would approach the whole thing differently.
Yes. Yeah, and I agree with you about GPs, because unfortunately you take a symptom or a couple of symptoms to them,
yes,
and they address that. They, as you say, they don't tend to look at our whole holistic situation.
no.
And I think they're not, as you say, that they misdiagnose really. They say, oh, you've got depression and that's it. So
Yes.
you put on antidepressants.
Psychiatrist, yeah.
Yeah. Or you go and see somebody and talk about it.
Mm.
And it doesn't help, does it? Because it might resolve that slight issue, but then you've got all the others, and then it's all, well, how do I deal with that? And how do I deal with that? And how do I deal with that? And you're struggling with it. And I think you're right. It just needs to be clear and helpful to women to understand. And I know you work in the workplace too. You help in the workplace, because that's really important too, because it can raise so many issues when you're trying to work. And
well, for us, it's but that's why I decided to go into the workplace, because trying to speak to women on an individual level, or even group women, just outside in normal circumstances, if you were trying to put on an event where just women were coming, and I'm talking about 10 years ago when it was even less understood, women just weren't owning up to it. And I understood that, because I didn't want to own up to it either. And so by going into the workplace, the women are all there. And at first, when I started, I noticed it stuck out like a sore thumb. If I had a mixed gender audience and I asked for questions, nobody would put their hand up. But they'd all come and see me afterwards. They were so frightened of saying, please, I need help. You know, I've got this, what's going on? They were so frightened of being recognised, perhaps as being a troublemaker, and recognised that they're not doing their job properly and potentially could lose their job. And of course, now it's recognised that they are protected under the Disability Act. Why it has to come under disability, who knows? Perhaps we can change that. But they are covered in law and don't need to go down a disciplinary procedure if it's discovered that they're going through menopause. But it's having that knowledge. So we're training line managers as well to recognise menopause, and we give them some tools to do that, so that they can have a good conversation with their staff, rather than this argumentative arena that is often the norm at the moment.
Wow. Well, I was not aware that it was a recognisable, disability, but at least it's being recognised. And I mean, it does sound a bit heavy.
It does.
I guess. Well, what box do you put it in? I don't know, but it's not mental health.
To go in the box. Yes.
Yeah, but I bet there are an awful lot of employees who are unaware of that.
Yes.
You know, that they are covered under the employment law. Because I think that's important.
Yes, and we're working with HR lawyers because I did a webinar recently, and the person on the call said, "Well, what do I do? I've got this woman who's been absent a lot, blah blah. We need to do something about it." So the lawyer said, well, it's Disability Act 2010, and you need to get a report from her GP about what's going on, about her situation, her short-term and long-term situation as well. And I said, well, can I just interject there? Because you're going to the GP to get a report, and 9 times out of 10, that GP will not have sufficient knowledge of menopause to be able to do an unbiased report in that direction. They will report on mental health issues because of stress, anxiety, depression, and all the rest of it, taking her down completely the wrong route, misdiagnosis, antidepressants, and everything that goes with that. So it's important now for us to educate the lawyers about what menopause means within the Disability Act, and how that they need to be more specific when requesting report information, so that they've already perhaps discovered that it's menopause, and so this is why we need the report. We think it's this. And so then he or she, the doctor will have a better understanding of what's going on when he talks to his patient. And so they're both singing from the same song sheet, as they say. And that should bring about a better result.
Yeah, so it's quite a journey, isn't it? Because if we haven't got GPs understanding, if we haven't got lawyers understanding, if we haven't got HR understanding, if we haven't got line managers understanding, there's quite a chain of command, isn't there, to get through?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, it's quite a big one. Yeah, absolutely. And there is quite a misnomer about what the menopause is about.
Yes, definitely. Myself included at that time, I thought menopause was for older women. But of course, hormones start changing from around the age of 35. And that comes as quite a shock to a lot of women. They go, what, 35? And but it's not really till you're in, say, your mid-40s that you start to notice the PMS a bit more. You might miss the odd period. And even the word menopause itself is a misnomer, because all it means is you've been 12 months without a period, and then you are postmenopausal, and that's it. Unfortunately, if you start a bleed within that 12 months, you then got to go back to month 1 and count again for another 12. But it's that section of 12 months without menstruating, and then you're postmenopausal. And also on top of that, some women, by the time they get to that age, and it's usually about 52 is that average age, but it's those years leading up to it, and even up to about 5 years beyond it. And in some cases, when some women reach that actual menopause stage, that's when they start experiencing symptoms. So they've gone all that time, sailed through it in their view, and then bang, they start getting the hot flashes and sweats and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
It's a game.
Yes, well, I can remember I'm talking to my aunt and saying, well, how long does the menopause last?
Yes.
And she said, well, it could go on for years. And I looked at her absolutely horrified. And she said, well, think about it. It's a reversal of puberty. And how long did that take? Okay, thank you. Now that's all I knew, and it really wasn't talked about. So it was really, I was in the dark and
yes,
didn't know where to go. And it was before we had the internet. So
yes,
now at least we can search the internet, or at least we can talk to people online. And there's so much more open to us, isn't there? So
there is. Yes, I'm talking to women not women. I'm talking to therapists as well in Canada and America. And they're wanting to know about my training now, because I seem to be one of the only people who are doing the workplace training. So, and what is special about that is you're giving tools to the managers to understand it. So it's not just a case of talking to women and let them have the opportunity to tell their own story and let their hair down and have a cry and do all the things that we do to try and overcome these things when we're in a women's group session. But it's important that the men get a handle on it too, and because they can be very perceptive and helpful. Yes,
and I think once you know what's going on, it doesn't cure it, but at least you've got a better idea. And
well, for me, once I'd realised that there was this long list of symptoms, I'm ticking all the boxes, it was just a relief knowing that I wasn't dying of something. It was, so this is menopause. Who knew? And it's just crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and for partners as well.
Yes.
For men, because, again, they're on the outside when it comes to PMS. They're on the outside of things through pregnancy and childbirth, and then they've got to face on the outside again the menopause, and it must be really.
And again, with gender, we bring that into our training. It's the gender differences. Men think quite differently to women. The men want to fix it.
Yeah.
Men want to talk about it. Men want their man cave to go and do things in. So it's about understanding those gender differences as well, and being more collaborative in trying to understand, help and support staff. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Well, I have the same, because working with couples, that's exactly, you know, because they function differently, and we talk about it, and the fact that men do have a habit of going into their man cave, and yes, they are fixers because they're hunter-gatherers, basically, and we as women are nurturers, therefore. And we want to talk about things because we are more emotional. So when you start talking to them and explaining that and encouraging, you know, and supporting each other, that's when you can see a change. But when they haven't got that to start with, and then the menopause kicks in, it's
it's yes, it's guns at dawn, I think. Yeah.
Yes, hide the knives. So what kind of challenges that people raise with you when they get to talk? Because you're saying they find it a bit intimidating at times, but what things do you take up to talk about?
Yes, lots of people raise the issue of weight gain, and that happened to me as well. I put on about 2.5 stone, but I've met women that have put on 4 stone, and again had no idea why. You know, they were eating lettuce leaves. Why am I putting on all this weight? And the reason is it's a natural process because of your hormone fluctuations, and in fact your the deterioration of your estrogen. It's taken a long hike and will never to be seen again. That your cell structure changes. So when you're eating food which would normally give you energy, it is that now reverses to be stored as fat. Presumably for the protection of bones, because we then become susceptible to osteoporosis, which I was. And so I understand that fully. But there is something you can do about it, and that is understanding nutrition better, understanding how your body works with the food you put in it. Definitely being more hydrated, because constipation is a big thing. And that used to be with me as well. And then somebody told me, a therapist told me one day, drink a glass of water every morning as soon as you wake up. And that's room temperature, none of that freezing cold brain freeze stuff. And it worked. And so I've never bought any pills and potions again. And so I tell everybody, you know, drink the 2 litres of water. We are plants and we need feeding and sustaining with water. And that will help your system flush through as well. And everybody that's tried it, this glass of water in the morning, and they are so surprised that it works. And it's great when they come back to me and say, do you know what, that works? And so that's my freebie of the day. That's something you can do that doesn't cost you anything. And good.
Yeah, because I think people tend to look for those pills and potions instead of, as you say, looking at themselves and how they could work on themselves and do things like free things and just looking at ways. And people want an instant fix. We're in that instant fix.
We do, and of course women at this age, at this time, are more susceptible to type 2 diabetes, and you can eat your way out of type 2 diabetes with the right nutritional advice. And that's what they need to do. If they've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, you're then on pills for the rest of your life. Why? You know, it's just not necessary. You can do it. It's hard work. Nothing's easy, is it, if you want good results at the end of it? But if you persevere, you will relieve yourself of all that pill taking and be healthier for it.
Yes. Yeah, because if you take more medication, it's more chemicals, and then you're changing the chemicals in your body because, we are made up of chemicals and electrical pulses and all sorts of things, and people don't realise that.
No.
So, very true. So, really good advice there. And men, what is their role? How can we help those guys?
Yes. Well, I think... for me, there is a lot of information out there on the internet. There's also a lot of rubbish out there on the internet. And as far as I'm concerned, I tell it like it is because I've experienced it. So it's my story. that all this is based on, and then we bring in other people's stories. But on my website, if people just want to go on to simplyhormones.com and have a look around, there are a lot of blogs and podcasts that I've done with medical practitioners, even talking about embarrassing things like vaginal atrophy, and which is vaginal dryness, and so they can get all that information. And if they are working full time and they would like their employer to do something about it, or their manager, then just introduce them to us, and we'll try and get some information into the workplace for them. There are a lot of different avenues you can take, and we talk about HRT, and we talk about alternative sources of to help you reduce your symptoms. And it's this whole holistic affair. So yeah, and if we don't know about it, we know a lot of experts that do. And relationships could go to people like yourself, for instance, to help them understand the whole situation better, and stay together. Because that's what brought me back from the brink. Because I thought that it just looked like I was facing the abyss, this thing called divorce. And I just couldn't go down that route. So I thought, what can I do about this? So I started a conversation, and we started analysing each other's childhood. And well, I used to do this. Why did you do that? Oh, because of this, that, and the other. And it just started to make sense. But it was a neutral piece of ground for us to start talking again. And it's just about getting information. To be better informed, you're going to make better decisions, aren't you?
Yeah. The sad part that I find is that when I get couples coming to me and they just haven't talked, they've just drifted on, and then one of them has said, that's it, I want out, I can't cope anymore, and they've just emotionally left the relationship.
Yes.
And I feel that's so sad, because they've drifted on and drifted on. They've not communicated. They've both been in their own little worlds. And there's a lot of things. I always say we have a different map of the world. Everybody has a different map of the world. Yes. And if you are looking at a map and assuming that you're both looking at the same map and you're not, you're stuffed.
Yes. Yes. And you can come back. It's not the end.
I so agree. If that's where I have a passion, is for helping those couples that do want to stay together, I say relationships aren't disposable. We live in a disposable society,
yes,
but you can't keep throwing everything away. And I mean, there are relationships you're never going to pull back.
No,
but there are a lot that could be pulled back if only they did something about it in time rather than too late. And how great it was that you sat down with your husband and did talk to each other and were able to talk to each other, because when I see that happening, when I'm the sat nav sitting there with them, the impartial person, it's just magical to see they say, I never heard you say that before.
No.
And the other one says, but I've been telling you that.
Yes.
Effectively, they just haven't heard it. They just haven't had their ears really open to it. And when you can do that, it is amazing. But and then you can face those struggles of the menopause together, because have a little bit more understanding and connection.
And the rest of your life together, because, that the way I also looked at it was, I've been married to this guy for a long time. We loved each other once. We've got 3 beautiful children, house, a car, and all the rest that goes with it. We've done all this. Why do I want to throw it away? There must be some common ground I can find there that we can come back to, surely. And as you say, some couples, it really is the end. They perhaps were incompatible all along. But I just felt that there was still something there. And it didn't happen overnight, but we just kept going. And I think bearing each other's feelings in mind, which we hadn't done for a long time, and just thinking about how each other feels.
That is so reassuring to hear, and such a lovely story, because I hope that some of our listeners will hear that story and acknowledge it, because I think it's great that you had been married quite a while and then just decided you weren't going to throw it away. You were going to work at it, and you have turned it round. Because too many couples say it's too late, I can't do it, don't want to. And I sometimes feel they miss out on so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
And years down the line, that's when, the benefit of hindsight, they say to themselves, I think I could have done something about that. That's the sad part, isn't it?
It is. It's very, very sad. And sometimes they just don't learn about themselves from that, and they carry on making the same mistakes.
Yes.
And go from one relationship to another without us sitting down and saying, okay, where did that go wrong? What happened there? How did what part did I play in it? Because generally both people do.
Yes.
But I think the big part, as you said, there's communication. That's one thing. But it's being there for each other and understanding, or being prepared to understand the other person's point of view. You don't have to agree with them.
No.
But literally being prepared to hear their point of view, which you would do with a friend or a colleague or...
Yeah, and have your own point of view without slamming it down somebody else's throat, without arguing about it all the time. Just agree to disagree.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
It doesn't, does it?
No.
There was something really simple that I heard the other day, and I thought it was about the toilet seat. And it was a guide to, and it could have been actually a comedy thing on TV. I don't know what it was, but it really came home to me. I thought, I never look at it from a woman's point of view. Women always grumble about men leaving the toilet seat up.
Yes.
But they're not acknowledging the fact that the men are being considerate, that they're not going to make a mess on the seat. And so actually they are being considerate. And women do, why did you leave the toilet seat up? You're so inconsiderate.
Yes.
No, they're being considerate enough not to make a mess on the toilet seat. And I think, wow, so there are always two sides to every story. It's a very simple example, but it is just understanding each other's point of view, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, right, that's why you do that. And why would the woman want it put down? Well, checking it out. Why is it so important?
Yes.
But, I want it my way.
Yes. You're the one in the wrong.
Yeah, actually, it's just a different way of viewing things.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So is there anything else you want to add that we haven't talked about so far?
No, I made some notes earlier, but I think we've just about covered everything, really.
Yeah.
It's been a great conversation. Can you think of anything I've missed?
I just wonder, you run training programs around the country, is it?
Yes.
Because that's an important thing to know about.
I now have a group of what we call Menopause Ambassadors, professional trainers based around the country. And the great thing about that is they are passionate about menopause because they've been going through it. And so that gives a whole different aspect when you're delivering training in the workplace, because you're delivering it from experience, and it's not just a set of rules that you've got to talk about change in the workplace or leadership or all the usual training stuff. This is about a menopause. It's a very emotional thing, and we get top marks for our training, not only for the trainer who's delivering it, but for the content and how they're utilizing it once they've got that information and making it work in the workplace. And everybody's talking about it. It's just brilliant. And I say everybody, in our little world, everybody's talking about it. But hopefully, that world is growing, and it's good news.
So how do people find out where, which regions or where you have your centres of training? How do they find that out?
Well, we are all over the country, and the best thing is just to go onto the website, simplyhormones.com, send us an email or give us a call. Both connections are on there. And we'll have a conversation with you about what you think you need and how we can help you and where are you based. And then we will put one of our menopause ambassadors in direct contact with you so that you can have that personal conversation and know that trainer is coming to your place of work to deliver that information, so it builds a better relationship.
You've mentioned your website, and that's the best place to get hold of you. All your details are on your website?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay. All the information will be in the show notes. So, again, people can pick it up from there.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's been really delightful talking to you again, Kathryn.
Absolute pleasure.
And I hope our listeners have had some interesting information, and I certainly have.
Good.
And yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you can find all the information about this show in the show notes. And you can find lots more on my website, www.yourrelationshipspecialist.co.uk, including the link to my podcasts. And you can also sign up on my newsletter, which has lots more tips and offers. So until next time, bye for now.